Back in the time of Emperor Leo, 3 peasants arrived on foot in the Byzantine capital from Bederiana, in present-day Serbia, wishing to change their abject poverty for a career in the army. Their entire household consisted of sheepskin coats in which they were dressed, and second-rate bread, overbaked from breadcrumbs. One of these peasants accepted as a soldier was Justin. For his height and beauty he was immediately assigned to the palace guard, and for many years moved up the career ladder not far from the emperor. In the reign of Anastasius, Justin had a chance to fight. He participated in the suppression of the rebellion of the Isaurians under the command of John, nicknamed Kurt, Humpback. He was arrested for some offenses and was about to be executed, but then he was pardoned. Time passed, and the former poor man achieved great influence. He became the head of the palace guard. During the long 27-year reign of Anastasius, his country became stronger and stronger. The army was fed and clothed, the authorities sorted out taxes and began to receive considerable money, which was spent on the construction of fortifications and other public expenditures. Under Anastasius they built a large 45-kilometer wall, which blocked from sea to sea the distant approaches to the capital. Now enemies from Europe could be contained at a great distance. Let's say at once it didn't help. In the future, all invasion armies penetrated behind the wall without problems. In the east, border fortresses were built to protect the borders from the Sassanids gaining strength under Shahin Shah Kavad. Toward the end of Anastasius's reign, the old problem of the religious split between Rome and Constantinople flared up. The conflict was long contained, but still it grew to a hot stage. Comite Vitellianus, a staunch supporter of the Chalcedonites, revolted and besieged Constantinople, even blockading the capital from the sea. In Vitalian's army there were many federates among which, except for Huns, Bulgarians were present and Getae, in which modern historians see Slavs. For several years, then approaching the capital, then getting what he wanted and leaving, Vitalian demanded the end of the religious schism in court from the Pope. Finally it was Justin, himself a native of the lands where the rebellion was raging, who was able to repel the third siege. A fleet of hundreds of Slavic boats were burned by Greek fire, after which the land army retreated haphazardly, losing its organization and many of its commanders. Vitalin took refuge in the rebellious provinces. Realizing all the inconveniences of schism, splitting the empire into 2 parts, Anastasius began negotiations with Pope Hormizd. The latter offered his variant of the peace treaty, the famous formula of Hormizdae libellus Hormizdae, which actually offered Constantinople to surrender and recognize Rome as the most important and the only true stronghold of faith in the whole world. No one signed it, of course. In the summer of 518, Emperor Anastasius died, in the night, in a thunderstorm. Although the old man was already 80 years old, he had never named an heir, nor had he left any instructions in case of his death. The news spread quickly through the palace, and the next morning all the highest ranks of the empire gathered at the hippodrome to decide what to do next. Candidates for the throne were discussed and nominated. The participants applauded the pretender, and the decision was made by the noise of the crowd and the strength of the applause. This was called acclamation. Present were Anastasius's 3 nephews, the newly appointed Patriarch of Constantinople, Justin and his guards, and many, many others. As usual, parties of players reigned on the hippodrome. The 2 most important were blue and green. The greens inclined to the Monophysites, the blues to the Chalcedonians. One after another all sorts of officers and officials tried to proclaim him emperor, but each time the roar of support was drowned in a roar of disapproval. Justinian was offered money for help in nominating one of the candidates, but he refused. They tried to nominate Justin as well, but he refused to do so. Each of the candidates for emperor caused discontent among the factions of fans at the races. The blues were against the green candidates and vice versa. Finally, losing patience, the senators agreed on a single candidate, the old and illiterate Justin. Backed by the army, already a profound old man, Justin agreed, but in the heat of the debate, someone displeased with this turn of events managed to break his lip. At the hippodrome he was appointed emperor and blessed by the Patriarch. Justin I was completely uneducated and illiterate. All his affairs were managed by one Proclus, a man of integrity, and for the emperor himself a wooden tablet was made, which he put to paper and scribbled with a pen on the slots. In this way he could write, "I have read." Born in the western part of the empire, where Chalcedonianism was strong, Justin decided to restore peace with Rome and recognized the Council of Chalcedon, renouncing the Enoticon. By order of the emperor, John II signed the Hormisdus Formula, and thus completely changed the religious policy in the empire. The Hormizd Formula is Rome's greatest victory, driving a wedge between the Western and Eastern churches forever. The document emphasizes the unsteadiness of Constantinople in matters of faith, thus leaving only one pure patriarchate, Rome. The document anathematizes the Eastern patriarchs. In addition, the formula demanded the fulfillment of all the requirements that had been contained earlier in the epistles of Pope Leo. Justin was very eager to conclude a religious peace, because a rebellion was blazing west of the capital. But the libellus, which was being forced to be signed throughout the empire, provoked fierce rejection in the east. In fact, priests from Syria and Egypt had to sign anathemas against themselves. Many priests in the east united against the new rules, and after countless sufferings and exiles, formed their own Syriac Orthodox Church, with Jacob Beradei as its first patriarch. The election of an old and illiterate chief of palace guards as emperor in the stadium was initially seen by many as a temporary solution, a compromise before the decisive battle for the throne. In addition, the hippodrome parties of Vannes and Prazins, who participated in the acclamation, rightly believed that it was they who had chosen the emperor, and now he is obliged to listen to the opinion of his voters. Many of the officials surrounding the emperor had nominated other candidates during the election. The first thing the old man started with, barring the execution of a challenger who tried to declare himself the new emperor a few days later, was a large rotation of courtiers. Justinian's two nephews, Germanus and Justinianus, were the first to be summoned. The young men were given positions and became their uncle's most faithful assistants. Vitalian, the indomitable fighter for the Chalcedonites, was summoned from exile. Farther back to the capital were returned many prominent officials who, for one reason or another, had fallen into disgrace under Anastasius. Let Vitalian be killed after some time. Under unclear circumstances, many of the disgraced officials would serve the state long and faithfully. Justinian got a huge treasury. Not only that Anastasius' well-established tax collection, he also did not pay the promised treaties to Persia and Vitalian. But his army was paid very well, and the empire had no shortage of soldiers. Walls of fortresses were repaired and new fortifications on the borders were built. The emperor himself, according to many chroniclers, was old and sick, but relying on his nephews, not only continued effective rule, but even began to develop foreign policy activity. The reason for such actions most likely should be sought in the favorite nephew of the emperor, Justinian. Not spoiled by fate at the beginning of his life, Justinian could appreciate the happy turn of fate, suddenly thrown him to the top of power in the empire. Active and persistent, the young man decided to approach the management of the state systematically. He spent a lot of time in libraries, studying the works of the best minds of the time. Quite quickly, Justinian completely trusted his nephew in everything that was connected with foreign policy. Plus, the guy became proficient in many areas of administration and trade. Sometimes Justinian is presented as a smart guy who got the power, and he was happy to meddle in all spheres of life, inventing new rules and carrying out reforms even where no one asked him to. Even if this is true, he was a bookworm, adjusted for those harsh times, and his reading did not prevent him from successfully leading the campaign to the south, where the Byzantine fleet together with Aksum defeated the Jewish kingdom of Himyar. A small expeditionary corps of Ethiopians with one blow defeated the kingdom, which did not enjoy the support of the population, and apparently forever instilled in Justinian confidence in the possibility of a successful war at a great distance from home. In the future, Justinian would no longer participate in wars, relying on his loyal and glorious commanders. Rarely has any politician dealt with matters of state with such enthusiasm as the young Justinian. His reforms would probably affect every aspect of the life of the people of the time. For now, the young lion was only gaining experience, and Justinian, with the caution inherent in all old men, did not allow the young man to unfold in full force, wanting to rule in peace. He did not even allow him to marry his beloved Theodora, because the law required her to be of noble birth. Then, when Justinian's wife dies, most of all opposed to this marriage, the law will be cancelled, and the marriage will take place the very next day. And this was all Justinian, who calmly cancelled and published new laws, not trembling before the holy traditions. Problems were already enough. The religious treaty with Rome in the eastern part of the empire was perceived extremely disapprovingly. The parties of the Hippodrome believed that now the power is them, and for several years organized in the cities of the empire acts of disobedience. The Persians, dissatisfied with the success of Byzantium on the southern trade routes, increased the onslaught in Georgia, in what was then Iberia, and Justinian, having returned from Arabia, was forced to manage the armies in a real war with great battles, which broke out in 526th year and never ended before the death of Emperor Justinian. Large armies gave each other bloody battles. Persians took cities in the north, Byzantines in the south. Arabs plundered, tribes from the Caucasus went to earn money as mercenaries. Already in this war, the remarkable commander Belisarius, in the future the main general of Justinian in all his adventures, came forward. In the west, after the death of Theodoric, the Germanic states began to slowly slip into a great feud. Byzantium closely followed the development of events in the former provinces of the empire. Even before the war Kavad, the Sassanid Shahin Shah offered childless Justinian to unite the two empires under the crown of his son, the talented and active Khosrow. In return, he promised religious unification, the adoption of Christianity by the Persians. Justin, of course, wisely refused. History teaches us that contracts, when one party gets something at once and undertakes to fulfill its obligations later, or to do something forever, almost always end in deception of the party that immediately fulfilled its part of the deal. Justinian had great power in the empire, but the old man for a long time did not agree to appoint him co-emperor. But here, sensing the approach of death, agreed to the requests of the Senate, and solemnly crowned Justinian and Theodora as August and Augusta. 4 months remained before the death of the most successful peasant. How the young engine of progress, Justinian the Great, who received in his hands the most powerful empire of the world, and what pleasant and unpleasant surprises will prepare him history, we will learn in the continuation.